Children International is a sponsorship model based organization. So for your $39 a month, you sponsor a child in another country who is in a distressed situation. And when I say distressed, I mean long term economic depression. We work in mostly poverty stricken areas. And your $39 a month helps us to provide programming to that child that helps them to be healthy, educated, empowered to seek out their own goals and achieve their own goals, and ultimately, as they reach young adulthood, to become employable within the context of their local communities. So, our business is about empowerment. Copilot and ChatGPT and other tools have been released on the ChatGPT model. We are able to get much higher quality translations that are contextually accurate.
We are back today with another podcast, another series with a very, very exciting guest for you. This is Discovering the Genius Within by interviewing innovative and fantastic product managers and leaders from all over the industry. And today with me, I have Tam. Tam is a product manager in nonprofit. So if you could give us a little bit of an introduction to yourself.
Well, hello, everybody. I'm Tamara Copple. Most people know someone with my name, so I tend to go by Tam. It's just much easier to remember. And I am a product owner. Officially is my title. I consider myself to be a product manager for reasons we can get into at Children International, which is a humanitarian nonprofit headquartered in Kansas City, Missouri.
Welcome, Tam. Thank you so much for that great introduction. I'm really, really curious because I always worked in banks, which make a lot of money, and startups. Again, the idea was always to monetize what we do. So, how is working as a product manager in nonprofit different?
The paradigm of the nonprofit is primarily different in the sense that we have to inject a higher degree of humanity, of compassion, and of service to the world in our day-to-day activities. So whereas a
Welcome. We are back today with another podcast, another series with a very, very exciting guest for you. And this is Discovering the Genius Within. And we do that by interviewing innovative and fantastic product managers and leaders from all over the industry. And today with me, I have Tam. Tam is a product manager in nonprofits and understanding what a product manager does in nonprofits. I loved for you and for my audience to know you a little bit better. So if you could give us a little bit of an introduction to yourself.
Well, hello, everybody. I'm Tamara Copple. Most people know someone with my name, so I tend to go by Tam. It's just much easier to remember. And I am a product owner. Officially is my title. I consider myself to be a product manager for reasons we can get into at Children International, which is a humanitarian nonprofit headquartered in Kansas City, Missouri.
Welcome, Tam. Thank you so much for that great introduction. I am really, really curious because I always worked in banks, which make a lot of money, and startups. Again, the idea was always to monetize what we do. So, how is working as a product manager in nonprofit different?
The paradigm of the nonprofit is primarily different in the sense that we have to inject a higher degree of humanity, of compassion, and of service to the world in our day-to-day activities. So whereas a for-profit business is in business to make more money, we aren't in the business of making more money. We are in the business of helping the world be a better place in service to something that is much bigger than ourselves. So while there are some aesthetic or cosmetic similarities between the way that we conduct our business, the difference and the angle that we come at our work is very, very different from that of the for-profit sector.
And in a nonprofit or in your nonprofit, who are your stakeholders?
Children International is a sponsorship model based organization. So for your $39 a month, you sponsor a child in another country who is in a distressed situation. And when I say distressed, I mean long term economic depression. We work in mostly poverty stricken areas. And your $39 a month helps us to provide programming to that child that helps them to be healthy, educated, empowered to seek out their own goals and achieve their own goals. And ultimately, as they reach young adulthood, to become employable within the context of their local communities. So our business is about empowerment. We have two major types of stakeholders that my team and I work with on a daily basis. My part of the business, I'm working with our global operations teams, our agencies in 10 different countries around the world. We have about half of our agencies and half of our kids in the Latin America area, and the other half of them are in South Asia and Asia. And my stakeholders are the field officers who are delivering the programming to these kids. They are the families themselves who are receiving the services and those children, in the sense that I am facilitating the development of a relationship between the child and the sponsor by providing a letter writing platform to those kids. And from my peers' perspective, their primary focus is on our sponsors and our sponsor experience, finding sponsors, retaining sponsors, giving them a very full and enriching experience that meets their goals, which we see primarily as being an enriching resource in a child's life and participating in something that is very deeply meaningful to that sponsor in service of a cause that is greater than themselves.
I did hear a story from you about how you do customer discovery. I would love to get your insight into that. How do you get the customer problem, customer needs, uh, I understood and clear with this set of stakeholders?
Since we work in 10 different countries and they have many different languages. For example, I'm learning Spanish because most of my development team is in Ecuador, but I still can't speak Spanish well enough to conduct my entire daily stand up with them. So I need help. So what we have done, and because I can't go to every single country on a monthly basis to see what's happening at the field, I heavily rely on a core group of stakeholders that we call our core field engagement team. They are mostly at the manager level and are much closer to the front lines, I call it, much closer to the service delivery points than I am. They seek feedback from their field officers who are delivering programs to the kids. They are seeing what is happening at our community centers, and they bring to the table their pain points, their ideas, their needs. We talk about that collectively, and then we make decisions as a group about what is important to the agency. Now, in addition to that, we also have strategic objectives that are coming down from our corporate level, from our higher ups. I sit squarely in the middle of those, marrying up our strategic objectives at the high level to the grassroots asks that are coming up and interpret how those grassroots asks can support our strategic objectives. And so there's a lens. It's a really collaborative effort. And I am so excited because I have a great team. They are very engaged and are always bringing new ideas. And our agency staff members, they have come up with some of the most creative ideas for using technology that they have access to and said, what if we did this? For example, Colombia might come up with an idea and it seems to work equally well in the Philippines, whereas India might come back with a different idea that doesn't work at all for, I don't know, Lusaka, let's say. So we have to balance those out. And that core field engagement team really helps me to understand what are the features that are going to add the most value to the most number of agencies so that I can, on occasion, put some focus fire on one specific agency that needs something that is unique to their needs, and I have the capacity to be able to give them the focus that they need for that time.
So, talking about features, how do you make decisions on those features? Which should be prioritized first, second? Is there any prioritization exercises that you do? And do you
All the
involve
time.
stakeholders in that?
The thing that has been working for us most effectively lately is the weighted shortest job first methodology. And I've used a lot of different ones, but this one is specific to using to the SAFE methodology. And we are not safe. We're not a SAFE certified shop. We're not specifically following that paradigm, but we do like that particular prioritization method. And here's why. It's the most mathematical and objective way of prioritizing that I've ever seen. And number two, it breaks the needs down when someone comes to me with an ask and they'll say, we need to send a new mailing out that accomplishes this task. I need to understand more about it. How time critical is this? What would be the cost if we didn't do this? What do we expect to gain from it? And by going through an exercise with our stakeholders of actually asking them, how valuable is this to you and why do you think that it's valuable to you? How many agency staff members is this going to affect? How many additional children can we serve because we introduce this efficiency? Coaching them to begin thinking about this will help us feel better or feel less stressed. It's we will be able to process 10 more children per day through our registration process, or we will be able to reduce the amount of time that we have to spend on this task by X amount of time. And any time that I can save the field staff in delivering services, that enables us to do more with the same number of resources. And it enables us ultimately to serve more children with the same number of resources. So I really like that WSJF, and here's where it breaks down a little bit. I may go through our entire list of asks with the business, and we have, when it all shakes out, a mathematical equation that says these 10 features are all at a 3.25. Now I have to go back through all of these and say, of all of the ones that have the same numeric value, now let's talk even further. Which one of those is more important? So numerically, we can say this is the most important clearly, then this one, then this one, then this one. But we've got this cluster in the middle of 5 or 6 things that all seem to be equally important. Okay, now we just need to focus in on those and say, within this subgroup, now what's important to you? And we have a much easier time actually coming up with a legitimate order as opposed to what stakeholders commonly want to do and say, but they're all important.
Yeah.
They're all equally important. We all need them in the. No, it doesn't work like that. You know it and I know it. So the coaching opportunity there is to say, okay, understanding that all of these are important within this context, which of these is the most important to fix first?
Yeah.
At that point, you do sometimes have to let a little bit of your gut instinct come in. Numbers will only take you so far, and then you have to have a really good relationship with your business owners and with your stakeholders to understand what their needs are and try and hear what they're not saying.
I really like this idea of hearing things that they're not saying. I love that idea. Thank you for sharing that. One of the things that we find, working in financial services organization, there's always a lot of pressure on planning and they want everything yesterday. Talking about planning in a context of nonprofit, specifically, creating roadmaps, are there certain techniques that you use for creating roadmaps?
This has been an evolution for us. When we first started using Scrum right around
Sure.
2018, we were just getting into that and really ramped up our game as the pandemic was getting underway. But what we have found works for us is a 3-month planning cycle. The organization sets its strategic objectives for the year. So directionally, by about July or August, I'm starting to think about what's going to happen in the following calendar year. And I'm asking my business owner, what do you see coming down the pike? What initiatives are going to be important next year? And I start putting those into for me, it's a PowerPoint presentation and it's a roadmap saying these are the things that we want to keep an eye on. That's long term for us is next year. And then the intermediate term for us is within the next 6 months. So within the next 6 months, these are the things that we know we're pending decisions about or clarification on that would allow us to actually start progress. And then in the short term, which is a 3-month planning cycle for us, in the short term, we have 4 3-week sprints and what we call an IP sprint, an innovation sprint.
Yeah.
That is a combination of both innovation and hurry up and finish everything that was left over. So reality strikes, right?
Okay.
So our planning cycles are 12 weeks, 4 3-week sprints, and we try and plan our work out in those cycles and know what we're going to commit to for that 3 months. Now, the question is what happens when they introduce something that wasn't on the plan? And this actually happened to me in the planning cycle that I'm in right now. We had literally just finished with our week-long intensive planning, and we had all our user stories prepped, and we knew exactly which sprints they were going to be in, and we were ready to go. The very next day, someone comes up and says, but wait, we need this thing by Memorial Day. We want this to go out of the door by Memorial Day, and it has to get to the sponsors, and this is important because of XYZ. And of course, we hadn't planned for that. We said, well, why didn't you tell us about this? We've been asking you for weeks ahead of schedule. What do you see coming? And nobody mentioned it. In this case, it was threatening to upend the PI literally within the first day. So we escalated this to executive management and said, we need you to make a judgment call on this. We have all these plans. Does this have to be done or can this wait till the next planning cycle? Well, yes, it did have to be done. We went back with the executive's direction. We knew what our marching orders were, fit it in. So we went back to our business owners collectively, my peers who are focused on sponsors and me that's focused on the agencies. And we said, okay, knowing that we have to get this out the door and these are the resources it's going to take to get it done, you get to pick what comes out. And they had some agency in choosing, okay, well, I guess this other thing has to fall out. And usually it's pretty easy. It's whatever was on the bottom of the priority list going into the PI. Now, the good news and the happy ending to that story is we're actually ahead of schedule from where we thought we'd be. So I'm sitting here, the end of my program increment is next Tuesday. I'm sitting here at the end of the PI and I'm going back to my backlog and I'm pulling in work because my developers are far enough ahead of schedule that they got it done and I have room to bring something back in. I would much rather be in that situation than have to go back 2 or 3 times during the PI and say, yep, we need to take something else out because it's taken more. So yeah, it's a negotiation every single time.
Well, it's a negotiation from the business side, so business features and changes to that. But there's another sort of hidden change that we have to manage as product managers, and that is technical debt. How do you balance, adding technical debt as against features? How do you make those decisions?
That is something that we are struggling with. I'm a huge advocate for when I say build the highway, that's what I mean by infrastructure and technical debt. For the big semi trucks to go down the highway has to be smooth. For the highway to be smooth, you have to maintain it. You have to maintain the roadbed, you have to maintain the asphalt. That's how important technical debt is. I lost a tire last week because I hit a pothole one too many times that had formed over the winter, and that was $1,000 worth of new tires.
I
My
love that
God, right?
analogy a lot. I love it.
When you don't take into account maintaining your infrastructure, it will cause unexpected problems later. So I'm an advocate for going back to my developers, especially to my tech leads, and saying, you tell me. I have no knowledge in this area. It's not something that I can refine with the business. I need you to help me understand why this is important, and I will be your advocate, and I will push for this. The exact proportion of how much we want to put towards technical debt versus new functionality versus production support can vary from one organization to the next, or even from one cycle to the next. Things may be going great, And then all of a sudden, you have a dumpster fire of production support on your hands that you have to pivot to. That happens. But what I'm talking about is if we had our preference, I would at least like to spend, say, 15% on our technical debt until we get to a point where we are stable. And I say that in my context, we've spent the last 5 years moving from a legacy CRM system that was being held together with spit and duct tape and baling twine to Microsoft Dynamics. So although that initiative is complete, we are still cleaning up the debris of everything that happened. So I call it stabilization. We're in a stabilization year. We've moved to the new system. It's no longer the new product, but now we need to stabilize it. Now we need to go back and fix all the things that we rushed through to finish the initiative on time, right?
Interesting. Now, we talked about prioritization, talked about planning. A big portion of what a product manager does is validate, your assumptions. So what are some hypotheses that you create looking at your you're looking at your prioritized features, and then
Mhm.
how do you test them?
We really have to hand it to our marketing team. They are huge advocates and aficionados of the strategizer testing methodology where you come up with a hypothesis, you run an experiment, you learn from it, and that prompts you to ask another question. In the IT team, we tend to go with prototypes. We try to minimally understand what is it that you're trying to do. And an example of that is we are beginning to find new ways of connecting and making sure that the children who are showing up to receive our programs are the children who are sponsored and registered to receive them, right? So we wanted to come up with something like Eventbrite, where you register for an event and when you show up, you get checked in. So our version of that is on a Power Platform model app, and we did a prototype. Given the fact that we knew we were going to have some clubs, those clubs exist in a place, that there are facilitators for those clubs that need to take attendance, and there are kids that will attend those clubs. We've basically got 4 different tables. And okay, how fast can we come up with something in Power Platform that allows us to connect clubs, our service delivery points, our facilitators, and our kids in a way that says, these are the kids who attended this club on this day at this location. And we ran a prototype. And when we had the prototype in a position that the business liked it, they said, let's run with it. And now they are piloting that in the field. And we're about 4 months into it. And now they're coming back to us with their learnings and saying, okay, here's what we think we're going to want next. So start small and then evolve your way into it.
Another thing that intrigues me is this whole emergence of AI in our industry. How does this impact, nonprofit, and what are certain features or aspects of AI you think you're going to be including in the near future?
If you just think about how can we as staff members of the nonprofit do our jobs better, more efficiently, faster, whatever, so that we can put more money towards the mission, there's lots of use cases. At Children International, where I am today, the very first thing that we started to do was explore making our child letter translations more contextually accurate. So in the early days of our digital transformation, although one of the very first things that we did was implement a translation service, this was like 2018, 2020. It wasn't very good in those days. It existed, it was okay, it wasn't great. Since then, and especially since Copilot and ChatGPT and other tools have been released on the ChatGPT model, we are able to get much higher quality translations that are contextually accurate. And when I say contextually, if we use the English language, the British use loo. I'm going to go to the loo. And in America, we say the bathroom or the restroom. In the same way, two Spanish speaking nations may have a different word for something as mundane as notebook. We are training our model to be more contextually accurate so that our staff members can spend their time I'm going to say reviewing the translation and approving it rather than doing manual translation themselves. Another way that we have it is in the Spanish language, the word padrino, Padrino, is often referred or using the masculine and feminine godmother, godson, goddaughter, whatever. In Children International, we use the word padrino to mean sponsor. So when the translation service comes back with the child used the word padrino and the translation service used godfather, for example, we know that we can train our AI to change that word contextually to sponsor. When padrino, use sponsor. That's specific to us and us only. We are also talking about other ways that we can do sentiment analysis. What in general are sponsors asking their kids? Is there a theme that's going on right now that we can latch onto and explore more? Does there seem to be a higher than usual interest in, I don't know, school books or school clothes? How are sponsors feeling? How are the kids feeling? Is there a general theme that would indicate to us that something is happening in this neighborhood that is more stressful than usual for these kids? Or are we seeing that they're very happy and that they are very, and I'm going to say excited? And is that, let's go look at that community center and what is that set of staff doing differently that is so much more effective than a neighbor? So we can use the insights that we can gain just from quantities of letter writing. Now, keep in mind, we do about 500,000 letters between sponsors and kids per year. We can learn a lot from those regular communications and things that we can explore. Finally, we have a community center in this area, but there's a whole concentration of kids that might need our services that is maybe not within walking distance of that community center. What can we do using some geolocation and some other analysis tools to say, is there a better place where we could put our training or our programs that is more easily accessible? Is there a neighborhood that we are not currently serving that might benefit from us? These are all areas in which we can use AI to help us do some really deep analysis that previously would have just been too labor intensive for us to do by ourselves.
This is really, really exciting. My nerves are at end because to see this transformation happening in the industry and the value that it brings in is fantastic. And especially this whole idea of contextual information. I come from India and I speak many languages and I know the difference, in the languages. And this is a fantastic use of AI. So really appreciate your ideas. Are there other emerging tools, technologies, just like AI, that you think are going to affect your industry?
I think AI is the one that everyone is talking about right now. And so that personally is where I'm putting my focus. As a product professional, I'm seeing that I'm going to need to be multidisciplinary. This is not just about, I cut my teeth on business analysis. I was a business analyst for decades before I became a product owner. That is how I was trained as a business analyst. And I keep coming back to those transferable skills that are useful to me from my BA days as a product owner. But now that I've been through this 5-year transformation effort, and I literally just had a conversation this morning in a meeting talking about change management and the pace at which we are introducing change to our agencies and exactly how much change can be absorbed in how much time before people's minds explode, right? So, as a product professional in a nonprofit specifically, I have to wear a lot of hats. I am the business analyst doing tier one tech support, trying to understand why something broke and whether that's actually a bug, a missed user requirement, or whether it's a business process change. I'm wearing a product hat, grooming the backlog. I'm wearing a product manager hat, trying to think strategically out to the vision as far out as we can think. What are things that we're not capable of today, but are starting to be a glimmer in my eye that we could do that would be really cool? And let's start planting seeds. I say let's plant seeds as to what we could do in the future. I'm thinking about change management. I'm thinking about project management. So, and this has become a very important topic for me personally, business analysis and product for 25 years. For me to advance, I need to elevate my craft beyond just knowing my job as a product owner. I need to know some change management. I need to
Yeah.
know some product management. I need to know some project management. I need to be able to do some technical support. And all of those things come together to help me be a better product professional.
My listeners are my students who come to my product owner class, my product manager class. They're also my students at NYU that are aspiring to, like you, become great product managers and leaders in their own industry. And if they're coming to work in a nonprofit organization, what would be some words of advice you would like to offer them?
First, build your relationships very intentionally and all the time. Always be planting seeds of relationships
Mhm.
with your LinkedIn network, with the people that you talk to in your class, with your trainers, with your employers. Try to find other professionals who interest you and have coffee with them. You're not asking them for a job. In fact, the very
Yeah,
best situation is when you're not asking for a job. Just say, I'm having a problem and I want to bounce off of you an idea. We're doing things this way in my organization and it feels out of kilter to me. How do you do it? What advice would you have? So build intentional relationships. And number two, expect to groom yourself into a culture of continuous learning. Never stop learning, because the big existential question right now is AI going to replace my job? And I'm not going to go down that path because we know it's not.
yeah,
But your skill set will change. And I have found that in the United States, at least, the business analyst role is becoming less and less visible in favor of the product role. So you will have to evolve as the industry does, as the job market does. Getting yourself into the mindset that you are never going to stop learning is the best thing that you can do for yourself as a young professional. Start buying books, start talking to people. And I'm telling you, buying all the business books is a whole lot cheaper than buying your textbooks
yeah,
anywhere, right? And that's for a
sure.
limited time, but I have a whole bookshelf and now I'm getting ready to start my second bookshelf of just business books that interest me. And I don't always read them. I use them as reference material. And I I will skim through them and I will say, "Ooh, that seems interesting." I was reading a book, for example, it's called Fierce Conversations by
Mhm.
Susan Scott. She has an entire chapter, and the title of that chapter is Be Aware of the Emotional Wake You Leave Behind You. And I'm like, I never thought about it like that. And just the title
Yeah.
of the chapter. So the rest of the book had value, but I bookmarked that chapter and said, I'm going to come back to that because someday I'm going to really need to dig into that even further and pay attention. So, yes, buy the books, buy them thrift because they're cheapest that way. Buy used books. I love getting used books that have highlights in them because I know what other people found fascinating. And the best ones, I agree with all of the highlights.
So, besides the book recommendation you had, do you have other recommendations for books?
The Trusted Advisor, an oldie but a goodie. The Trusted Advisor is about relationship building.
Yeah.
It was meant for a sales sort of an industry, but I think it has very broad applications as well. Crucial Conversations, I say, is a book I love to hate because if you're doing it right, it's going to piss you off and you'll realize that there's a lot that you can do to grow. So
Yeah.
that's, if it makes you angry, it's doing its job. Drop the Ball by Tiffany Dufu is one that I really, really like. That came out a couple of years ago. I have Training from the Back of the Room.
Yeah.
Love that. I don't always get to train, but I am sick to death of PowerPoint presentations. And I was looking to level up my game and find out how I can train. And I have the entire Bob Cohen series on agile product management. And then finally, I'm going to recommend a book strictly as reference material because it's pretty dry. The book is called How to Measure Anything.
You sound very passionate. And I think the one thing I want to sort of close with is, what would you recommend my listeners if they want to come work in a nonprofit organization? Come with this. Or if you don't have this, then don't come to this industry. Something that kind of makes you work where you work. And if you didn't have that, you would work somewhere else.
Know your value as a professional and what that is in the marketplace. Because when you go to work for a nonprofit, you should come expecting that you may not make that much because they're small, they're stretched thin. If you're lucky, yes, you get paid your value as it is in the marketplace, but that is less typical, right? So the reason you go to work for a nonprofit is because you believe in the mission. So understand that as you're going into it and know what number you need to have to make. When I came to Children International, I knew what my value was, and I had a conversation. If they come back to me, what is the minimum that I need for us to be able to survive
Yeah.
and pay the bills? And so I knew what my floor was and I knew what my value was. And so when they came back with something that was within that range, I was like, done. That makes the conversation much easier.
Yeah.
Because the other thing about organizations is that mine in particular, at least, is flat. And so you're not going to find your opportunities for growth in going from junior to analyst to senior to principal to manager. They just aren't there. It's a flat organization. So you have to look for your growth opportunities laterally. What are the new projects that I can get involved in? What are the networking connections that I can make? It's because you're not going to get the same kind of advancement, right? So, and nonprofits know that. They expect people to leave. But I think one of the things that makes Children International strong is we have a lot of long tenured people there. I also find that there's not a lot of nonprofit positions advertised out there because they're either, when I say shoestring budget, I mean, they just had their USAID funding cut. So that's a thing going on now too. Really shoestring, or they're just too small and they outsource their IT departments, for example. So cultivate that. For me, it's been harder to find nonprofits and connections at my level doing my job in the nonprofit space. So it may take longer to cultivate that.
Well, thank you, thank you, thank you so much, Tam, for your time today, because I really felt very passionate, hearing you. Also, some great book recommendations and also advice for my listeners. So I really, really appreciate your time.
Thank you,
And
Anil.
I'm looking forward to continuing our conversation in another version of our podcast as we learn more, grow more.
I would love to.
Ever felt like your product backlog was overflowing? Stakeholders were pulling you in different directions. And the development team was skeptical about this thing called Scrum and Agile. Here's the thing: market conditions changing all the time, technology is changing all the time, and customer needs are changing all the time. Companies don't just need product owners and Scrum masters who create specs or run meetings, they need visionaries who understand customer value, focus on outcomes instead of outputs, and can guide teams to deliver it rapidly and consistently. The question is, how do you become that product owner or Scrum Master? This is where I like to introduce you to Concepts and Beyond's Scrum Alliance certification courses. It really transforms the approach to product management and agile. Concepts and Beyond delivers Scrum Alliance certification courses that grow the Scrum Master and product owner. These courses are about mastering the mindset that deliver product innovation and team performance. What makes these courses different? Instead of theoretical lectures, we use brain science principles to make learning stick. Our trainers focus on practical skills you can apply in your next sprint. Imagine coming back to work with the confidence to prioritize your backlogs effectively, the skills to collaborate with developers meaningfully, and the know how to deliver products that customers actually love. The product owner journey starts with the CSPO, which is a 101 level course that has no prerequisite. If you have work experience, I would suggest taking the ACSPO course to become a practitioner. If you like to advance beyond that, take the CSPPO course that focuses on you becoming a master practitioner. The Scrum Master journey starts with the CSM, which is again a 101 level course that has no prerequisites. If you have work experience, I would highly recommend you take the ACSM to become a practitioner. And if you like to advance beyond that, take the Certified Scrum Professional Scrum Master, CSPSM, that focuses you on becoming a master practitioner. And if you're a leader leading your team and your organizations, then consider taking the Certified Agile Leadership Workshop. This class prepares you to manage the dramatic change we have been experiencing and lead yourself, your team, and your organization effectively. Here's what you get: interactive sessions using innovation games that unlock product creativity, real world scenarios that mirror your daily product challenges, practical tools for backlog management and stakeholder communication, and a supportive community of product professionals and Scrum professionals. Our trainers become your guides on your side in your agile journey. The best part, our in person and virtual courses fit into your busy schedule with cohort style learning that gives you time to practice between sessions. Visit conceptsandbeyond.com or scan this QR code and discover how your certification courses can transform your approach to product management